So today we have two daily objectives. Number one, explain why different people decided to break away from the Catholic Church. And number two, list the different Christian religious sects that broke away from Catholicism. So we are learning about the Protestant Reformation today, which is the point in history where the Catholic Church other Christian religions start breaking off from the Catholic Church. Why does this happen? Several major reasons. Remember, we talked about indulgences. Basically, people could buy forgiveness for their sins with gold. You give a priest some gold, he gives you a piece of paper that forgives your sins. You could even buy your way into heaven by buying indulgences. Catholics worship relics. To a lot of Christians, this was seen as violating the idea that only God should be worshipped. Number three, a lot of church officials, priests, monks, cardinals, were uneducated. They bought their seat. You want to be a cardinal? Pay the Pope some gold. This makes people angry. Simony takes us to simony, buying and selling of church offices. And finally, the loss of the Crusades. We've talked about Pope Alexander VI and how he tried to use his papal power, the power of the Catholic Church, to get his children kingdoms in Italy. So these are all the reasons why people wanted to split away from the Catholic Church. Next, the printing press. A guy by the name of Johannes Gutenberg invents the first printing press. Writers criticize the church, and using the printing press, they're able to make lots and lots of copies of their writings. This spreads their criticisms far and wide. Finally, the Bible, which up until this point was only written in Latin, and only people who could read Latin could read, which is only church officials and some nobles. The Bible is finally printed in the vernacular, the language that everyday people speak, French, German, English. And this allowed people to read the Bible themselves and start making their own opinions. So, the Protestant Reformation starts with Martin Luther. This is the original Martin Luther, the guy over on the right. This is the guy that Martin Luther King Jr. is named after. Now, Martin Luther is a German monk who really didn't like indulgences. As a result of indulgences, he publishes this paper called the 95 Thesis in protest. He actually nails this thing on the door of the Catholic Church in Germany. Now, in the 95 Thesis, Martin Luther outlines three basic teachings. Number one, you can only go to heaven if you believe in God, not by buying your way in. Number two, the Bible is the sole authority for Christian life, not the Pope. Number three, believers can be their own priests. If you're a good Christian, you can read the Bible and make your own conclusions. All three of these things directly challenge the Catholic Church and the Pope. As a result, the Pope excommunicates Martin Luther. He also declares Martin Luther a heretic. This means that he is not a true Christian and that the Pope says Martin Luther is going to hell. Martin Luther doesn't care. He doesn't believe the Pope anyway. The followers of Martin Luther are known as Protestants. That's why it's called the Protestant Reformation. So Martin Luther is the first big challenge to the Catholic Church. Number two is a guy by the name of John Calvin over here. John Calvin is in Switzerland. Now, John Calvin originally governed Geneva, Switzerland, a city in Switzerland. Remember, this makes him a theocracy because he's both a holy man and he's ruling a city. So Geneva, Switzerland at the time is a theocracy. He wrote a book called The Institutes of Christian Religion, and this text forms Calvinism. In the text, he says several things. Number one, humanity by nature is sinful. In other words, to simply be alive, you are sinning. He believes in church over state. The church has supremacy over the state and over all sorts of earthly governments, i.e., he believes in theocracies. He says that he believes in predestination. People are born to go to heaven. It doesn't matter what they do in life. People were selected from birth, and only those people are going to heaven. Everybody else is going to hell. Deal with it. He didn't believe in cards. He didn't generally believe in fun. He did like burning people at the stake. If he thought you were not destined to go to heaven, you were destined to go to hell, he's going to burn you alive. That's John Calvin. John Knox in Scotland. John Knox, also kind of sort of like the guy in Switzerland, is going to govern Scottish towns. So these are theocracies. John Knox is gonna form the Presbyterian faith. Presbyterians, still a practicing faith in large parts of the world. Now he wrote a book, First Blast of the Trumpet Against Women, in response to Queen Mary of Scots, the Queen of Scotland. And John Knox is actually going to help overthrow Mary, Queen of Scots, during her reign. John Knox, again a Protestant, really didn't like women, thought women was the source of all sin, and especially didn't like a woman queen as a result. And finally we have Henry VIII. So Henry VIII is in England. He is the King of England. Now Henry VIII wanted to have a son. Why does he want to have a son? Because only his son can inherit, because only his son can carry on his name, he can carry on the Tudor dynasty, and inherit his kingdom. His son would become the next King of England. He was really afraid of not having a son. He becomes convinced that his wife, Catherine of Aragon, could not conceive a son, so he wants to divorce her. Problem is, in Catholicism, Catholics don't really believe in divorce, and the Pope refuses to grant Henry a divorce. So what does Henry decide to do? Fine, you won't give me a divorce? I'll just make my own religion. So, at the urging of Protestants, he breaks away from Catholics in England, he breaks away from the Catholic Church and founds the Church of England. So Henry VIII separates from the Catholic Church, forms the Church of England, simply because the man wanted a divorce. He's going to have a series of divorces in his life. He's also going to behead most of his wives. Very tragic life. One of the most famous English kings because he was a little crazy. Finally, the Council of Trent. So the Catholic Church sees all of these people breaking apart, breaking away from the church. They see followers running away. They're collecting less and less tithes because people are taking their money elsewhere. So they call the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent is an effort to reform the Catholic Church. They say that Catholic priests, Catholic officials are going to have to be celibate. They're not allowed to marry. They're not allowed to have sex. They're going to say that pilgrimages and relics are valid expressions of piety. In other words, you can have relics. They're going to say that you can only go to heaven by faith and by doing good works. They're going to say that Bible and church tradition are the sole authority for a Christian's life, and that the Pope's interpretation of the Bible is final. This is the modern city of Trent in Germany. So this is the response by the Catholic Church to the Protestant Reformation. Take a few minutes, answer your daily objectives.